Can you talk about, because we often do talk about the proxy war in Ukraine on the show, but we haven't sufficiently explored its impact on Africa. So can you talk about that, please?
It's quite interesting that we've had several coups in the West Africa region over the last 3 years. And the majority of them have criticized France, the former colonial power, whether it's in Guinea, Conakry, Mali, or in Burkina Faso, and now in Gabon. Although Gabon has not come out directly, the new leadership and criticized France to the extent that Burkina Faso and Mali has. But it just illustrates that the so-called war on terror has worsened the security situation in West Africa. The French claim they went to Mali a decade ago to fight against the insurgents, the Islamic insurgent organizations that were causing problems in the north and the central part of the country. Yet over that time period, and even the military forces who were trained by France and by the United States are now saying that they are responsible for the deteriorating security situation in Mali and in Burkina Faso and other countries. This is really significant because these same countries, whether they're the military regimes that were trained and collaborated with the United States and France, or whether it is the masses of people who have not benefited at all from the French and U.S. neocolonial system, are looking towards Russia as an assistance in terms of security issues and economic issues as well. So I think the whole posture of the government in Washington, in the UK, and in Paris and Brussels is really alienating huge numbers of people throughout the world. Now, they may say that Russia is isolated, China is isolated, Iran is isolated, the countries, the military governments in West Africa are isolated. However, they are participating in some of the most profound diplomatic maneuvers and efforts that are taking place globally. For example, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa Plus summit that was held just recently in South Africa, where they expanded BRICS by 6 nations. There are many other countries that want to join. France attempted to invite itself, and they were disinvited to the summit.
Awkward.
It's really amazing what's going on. And then Biden, he goes to the G20 in New Delhi in India, and he's photographed shaking hands with Narendra Modi and many other leaders around the world, whether it's the Prince of Saudi Arabia, who he had said was a pariah several years ago, in an effort to shore up the U.S. Diplomatic efforts internationally. But I think, unfortunately, it's the people here in this country who are losing out on this whole process, because you see that prices are still going up for fuel, for rents, for mortgages, for automobiles, educational costs, healthcare costs, and yet at the same time, the administration is being championed in regard to Bidenomics for the low unemployment rate, for many other things that may or may not exist. So I think it's a global problem. We have to look at this not only on a local level, but to see how the local crises impacts the broader international crisis of political economy and insecurity. And that is going on to an ever greater degree on a daily basis.
How does Africa, I mean, obviously it's not a monolith, but what is the view from Africa in terms of the Ukraine proxy war, where the empathy lies?
Obviously, half the countries that abstained from the initial condemnations of Russia at the United Nations General Assembly were countries from Africa. Right. And the African Union has taken a position in favor of a diplomatic solution to the conflict in Ukraine. They're not necessarily calling for a Russian victory or Ukrainian victory. They're taking a non-aligned position because they see the detriment to Africa of the war in Ukraine. For example, the problems associated with agricultural exports. Russia is the largest agricultural producer in the world. Ukraine is also a large agricultural producer. With the war going on, it's impacting Russian as well as Ukrainian exports to West Asia and to Africa. Not just food, but also agricultural implements, for example, fertilizer and machinery and so forth. So yes, that is very, very important. And that's why I think Africa has taken a position. Most countries have taken a position in favor of a diplomatic solution. And as we've seen in Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger, and even in other countries, even in Ethiopia and South Africa, people flying Russian flags at mass demonstrations. Now, why is that occurring? It's a repudiation of the status quo, the neocolonialism that has been imposed in Africa since the 1950s during the period of national liberation. So I think definitely Africa is taking a correct position, but it's a lot more that needs to be done. As I mentioned earlier, it has to be a eventual conflict. Hopefully it'll be intellectual and political between the global South and those in the North that control the banks, that control the factories, and control the military apparatus that is at the root cause of instability and underdevelopment in the world today.
That would be great if there could be a non-violent conflict.
Yes.
Around this, because there's definitely enough violence now.
It is.